Hello and welcome to Glastonbury. Let's go right into it. John leapt to his feet in an ecstasy. Wonderful, it's wonderful, he cried. He came hurrying up to Mr. Evans. Seriously, sir, he blurted out. You'll have to play Christ in my pageant. You will, you will. You're not exactly the type, but that doesn't matter a bit. Oh, you will, you will. Why, you'd beat that Obermarangu person hollow. Mr. Evans picked up his hat and nondescript cane and advanced hurriedly to meet John. In his secret heart he had astonished and even puzzled by the feelings that again poured through him as he made the terrible symbolic gesture. I don't mind, he panted in a hoarse voice. Only you'll have to make it as real as you can. John regarded his friend through shrewd, screwed-up, meditative eyelids. Oh, we'll make it real enough, he said. But he was too occupied with the imaginative picture of that future scene to come very much what he was promising Mr. Evans, to care very much. Come up on up to the top of the hills, you two, won't you? He pleaded now. Can I leave this book here? Said Sean, looking first at St. Augustine and then at Mr. Evans. The Welshman surveyed the parcel which had done up so carefully. He evidently remembered that it was worth £20. I'll carry it, he said. Boys might come. You never know. The fear of boys was one of Mr. Evans's peculiarities. In fact, he was nervously scared of all children. But Sam tucked the big parcel under his own arm. It's not heavy, he said. It must have been about 30 minutes after 12 when they at last reached the top of the tor. They surveyed the great entrance to the hollow tower, and John tapped with his stick to the boardings with which it had been closed up. Major Wallop had that done, he remarked savagely. Old Shepherd found a boy and girl making love inside, and that was enough for our precious procreator. Boarded up it must be, so that the king should not have to fight his enemies with bastards. Let's sit down for a minute, said Sam. Now let's put this light on, because I'm having trouble reading. Yeah. They all obeyed him, sitting side by side on the grass, with their backs leaning against the western flank of the cold, slate-colored base of the tower. Before them, to the westward stretched the green water meadows, among which, a mile or so out of town, could be detected the wide lake village fen and even the little shanty of Abel Twig. While to the southwest, beyond the fens, rose the blue grey ridge of the low Polden Hills. All these were softly suffused by the cloud-latticed, vapor-filmed sun, a sun which, through riding at high noon, lacked the potency to dominate what it bathed with the glamorousness and watery light. Here under St. Michael's Tower sat these three figures, the lean, shabby, genteel John, the hulking, weather-bleached Sam, the black-coated Mr. Evans, all atheists towards the living sun god, and all expanding now in their thoughts, their feelings, their secretest hopes, because of the victory of vapor over light and of dampness over heat. A landscape of green and gray, a landscape with all hard outlines obliterated, was what just suited these three fantastical human beings. A common relaxation, a common inertia, a common languor descended upon them as they sat there, gazing down on this pastoral scene. And as they sat there, they each thought of a particular girl. They thought of these three feminine identities so intently that by the automatic preoccupation of their feelings, the soul of all three girls were drawn towards them. Three wraith-like Iadola. Ah! How little do the feminine creatures of the human race realize that long journeys they are compelled to take. With long, rapid journeys, swifter than light, under the compulsive magic of their men's imaginations. To the supernatural eye of that veiled sun as he dreams his indescribable planetary thoughts, vaguely hostile and vaguely menacing, one of those feminine forms came naked to the waist. That was Nell. One came naked from the thighs downward. That was Mary. And one came garmented like a nun from head to foot in black. And that was Cordelia. Together these three men represented, in remorse, in renunciation, in roguery, everything that separates our race from nature. Their 3 intelligences floated there on that hilltop above their clothed and crouching skeletons like wild, demented birds that had escaped from all normal restraints. Any student of ancient mythology might have fancied that Gwyn-ap-Nod, with a host of his elementals, finding these 3 detached intelligences, remorse, renunciation, and roguery, separated from natural human life, had cast his immemorial spell over them, that oldest of supernatural spells against which St. Michael's aid had been so often implored in vain. "What slaves we all are," remarked Mr. Evans suddenly, "to traditional ideas. People say we ought to be always admiring nature. God help me. There are endless occasions when I loathe nature. I think the truth is that God is outside nature, altogether outside, creator of it, but often loathing it as much as I do. I feel sometimes that matter is entirely evil, and that to cleanse our minds we must destroy its power. Destroy its power." He repeated these last words in his most serious tone, that tone which John had noticed when they first met, that tone in which each word seemed torn out of him like the deep-burrowing dock-root. Sam's hulking form swayed like a gnarled thorn bush in the high wind. "I protest against what you've just said, Evans, with every instinct I have. That's the essence of the incarnation. That's the—" He had become so excited that without knowing that, he was plucking great handfuls of the turf grass from between his huge, thick-soled boots. "That's what they really killed the abbot for," he went on, "because he wouldn't let anything come between him and it. It's the whole secret. It's where the most commonplace Christians can refute the greatest sages. Matter must be redeemed, and only Christ can redeem it. Christ, I say, not Jesus. Verbum caro fectum est. You're making matter evil undoes the whole thing. It's the incarnation and transforms nature. It has been done once. Nothing can reverse it. Something has come into its form from outside. From the outside you talk about. But it's in it now. You can't get rid of it. The simplest person has an instinct about it, wiser than the greatest philosophers. Something has taken up matter into itself. 2 and 2 can now make 5. It's the thing outside breaking into our closed circle. And every atom of matter feels it. Matter is no longer separate from spirit. It has become the living flesh of spirit. Verbum caro factum est. That's pretty interesting. Sam stopped. He gazed with confused surprise at the little weeds he had grubbed up in his agitation. He began planting them again in the hole he had made. He squeezed them into the yielding sod. He pressed them down with his strong thumbs, while his retreating chin, with all its quivering muscles, seemed to echo his discourse in a mute ripple of the matter whose redemption he had been defending. John regarded him with intense curiosity, as if he had been Balaam's ass suddenly endowed with the great gift of speech. "I suppose," John said, "you would call the Mass this kind of miracle?" Sam's reply to this was a vague groan. "Maybe you're right," he muttered. "Maybe you're right." "I suppose," said John to Sam, "you don't want to come to our rehearsal of the miracle play? The chap I've mean for the central figure will be glad enough to give it up to Evans." "Shall I make that lad who is doing it, St. Peter, hand that part over to you?" Sam felt at that moment as if he were a child whose secretest and most private game, a game he'd never revealed to a living soul, had become the sport of a noisy dormitory of jeering boys. He lowered his freckled face and drew down the corners of his mouth. 3 times he swallowed his saliva, and then he said with a forced unnatural chuckle, "I'll pay the entrance fee and come and see your circus, Crow, but nothing you could give me, nothing, not all the fortune of your rector of Northwold, would make me take part in it." "Oh, don't say that, Decker. What makes you say that?" "We'll call it shyness, Crow," said Sam slowly, but in a tone that was decisive. "Well, gentlemen," said Mr. Evans, rising to his feet, "I'm afraid I must get back to my shop. There's always a chance that a visitor after lunch, and it's 1:30 already." "Don't you have lunch yourself, then?" inquired John. "I was just going to suggest that we all have lunch together at that little tea shop on George Street." Mr. Evans pondered. He felt very hungry, and there was nothing in his larder except half a roll and a small piece of butter. Sam had felt so restless that morning that he'd told his father not to expect him back for the midday dinner. If he hadn't found Mr. Evans on his shop, he would have probably gone off on a long, solitary walk, perhaps in the direction of Queen's Sedgemoor, and perhaps not. He got up slowly again upon his feet, as did John. They were all three erect from now under the Tower of St. Michael, that same tower against which the murderous Tudor's executioners had leaned as they prepared the butchering abbot wedding. Sorry, I need some light. Sam spoke up boldly. You two have given me so much to think about that I shall have to walk off my excitement. I wonder. He hesitated for a second, with bowed head and working chin. Then his words came out with a rush. I wonder if you'd mind leaving this book at the vicarage as you go by? There was no difficulty thrown in Sam's way to either Mr. Evans or John, and he strode off alone down St. Michael's Hill. In order to leave them abruptly while it was easy for him to do so, he descended the Tor by its eastern slope. He had indeed stated no less than the exact truth when he said he wanted to walk off his excitement. His gaze swept the countryside as he climbed down into the valley. He glanced at Pennard Hill and Follywood, and at the fields and hedges around Stony Stratton. He glanced at the low-lying downs near Chesterblade, and thought to himself, that's the source of the Alham, and where the Alham runs into the Brue is only a mile south of Hornbloden. Thus was the little river Altham compelled to be the bearer of a lover's memory. For it was at Hornbloden that Sam had ridden with Nell when at the circus, so fatally remembered by Penny Pitches he had taken her on that roundabout. I don't remember any of this. When he reached the valley, he struck again across country heedless as to the lane or paths. His instincts for geography was only second to that of his father, and it was easy for him by following the meadows beyond the town reservoir between Norwood Farm and Haviot to reach the village of West Pennard without touching any road. Here he turned due north, and still crossing every hedge and ditch with the same animal-like straightness of direction, he made his way over Harder Moor, across the tracks to the Burnham and Evercreek Railroad, till he came to White Lake River at White Lake Bridge. Aren't you excited to know all that? Then he reached with the watch in his pocket pointed at 10 minutes past 3. He had no idea where the time was. In fact, he did not give the matter any thought. His thoughts followed one another like horses around a treadmill. Anyone reading his thoughts and contemplating the motion of his hands and the watch of his pockets might have been tempted to an extremely deterministic view of life. The mainspring of the one case was made of metal, and the other case made of the brutish sting of desire. But there was in both cases the same monotonous revolution about predetermined figures of demarcation. The filthy screen that had hid the sun had grown thicker since high noon. The surface of the small river reflected now what appeared to be a very cloudy sky, and the Willers and Alders was not mirrored there at all. Staring at the water, he tried to summon back every link to the dragging chain that had pulled him to this place. He meditated on the curious differences which exist when you consider the life of a river between the outlines of reflection in its flow and the outlines of shadows. Well, sorry for fumbling over so many lines there. I gotta get better lighting or read earlier in the day, perhaps. But until next time, I'll see you in Glastonbury. Tiddly-doo.